A billionaire CEO saved a single dad's dying daughter just to get her pregnant, but what happened next shocked the world. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to your own channel, Mr. Peter Family. May the Almighty wrap every woman in unshakable strength, infinite grace, and a peace that shelters her through every storm. May her tears water the seeds of courage, and her silence bloom into songs of hope and triumph. You are the light in the shadows, the calm in the chaos, and the heart that keeps love alive. May your days be gentle, your spirit unbreakable, and your soul always cradled in divine protection. My precious family, don't stay silent tonight. Your love breathes life into this home. A like is a blessing. A comment is a spark of unity. This is mission 1,000 likes for every woman who endures, who dreams, who rises. If you carry hope in your heart, like this video. If your spirit walks in courage, comment, I'm with Mr. Peter. Tasmin Grace signed her husband's death certificate at 3 in the morning, and by 9 she was in a board meeting because grief was a luxury she had never been able to afford. The lawyers sat around her mahogany conference table like vultures circling something already dead. Devon's accident had happened 14 hours ago, his Porsche wrapped around an oak tree on the highway, the smell of whiskey still thick in the wreckage when they cut him out. The police had been apologetic. The coroner had been efficient, and Tasmin had been numb. She had built Grace Enterprises from nothing. A girl from the projects who cleaned office buildings at night and studied architecture during the day. Her mother had died when she was 16, leaving her alone in a city that ate people like her for breakfast. Devon had found her when she was 23, broke and brilliant. He had believed in her when no one else did, married her when she had $200 in her bank account and a business plan nobody would fund. He had supported her through the early years, the rejections, the doors slammed in her face because she was young and black and a woman in an industry run by old white men who thought she should be grateful just to be in the room. He had held her when she cried after losing her first major deal, had celebrated with cheap champagne when she finally closed her second, had believed in her vision when everyone else called her crazy for thinking she could build an empire, and she had loved him for that, desperately, completely, with the kind of love that made her believe she could survive anything as long as he was beside her. But somewhere between her first million and her first billion, something had broken. Devon had started drinking more, started working less, started looking at her like she was a stranger who had stolen his wife's face. The touching stopped first. No more hand-holding, no more casual kisses, no more reaching for each other in the dark. Then, the talking. Their conversations became transactional, about schedules and obligations, never about feelings or dreams or the future they had once planned together. For the last year, they had lived in the same penthouse like ghosts haunting different rooms, separate bedrooms, separate lives, separate everything. She would hear him leave in the middle of the night sometimes, smell perfume that was not hers on his clothes, see the credit card charges for hotel rooms and expensive dinners for two. She never confronted him, never asked where he went or who he saw, because part of her was relieved. Relieved she did not have to pretend anymore. Relieved she did not have to smile and act like everything was fine when her marriage had died years ago and neither of them had bothered to bury it. Last night he had driven drunk into that tree, and Tasmin had felt relief before she felt sorrow, which told her everything about what their marriage had become. At the funeral 2 days earlier, she had stood dry-eyed while people offered condolences she did not want. Devon's brother Garrett had been there, watching her from across the cemetery with calculating eyes. He had approached her after the service, embraced her with all the warmth of a business transaction, whispered in her ear that they should talk soon about Devon's affairs. Something in his tone had made her skin crawl, but she had been too exhausted to question it, too numb to care. Now she understood why. Mrs. Grace, we need to discuss the will. The lead attorney, a thin man named Herbert who had worked for Devon's family for 30 years, slid a document across the table. Tasmin scanned it, her mind still sharp despite the exhaustion burning behind her eyes. There. Clause 14. Her heart stopped. "This cannot be legal," she said quietly. "It was added 5 years ago, shortly after your third IVF attempt failed," Herbert said, his voice careful. "If you do not produce a biological heir within 2 years of Mr. Grace's death, his entire estate reverts to his brother Garrett. That includes his 40% stake in Grace Enterprises." Tasmin's hands went cold. 40%. Enough to challenge her control. Enough to destroy everything she had built. Combined with the board members who were loyal to the Grace family name rather than to her, Garrett could dismantle her empire piece by piece. Devon wrote this. Yes. He had it drawn up after the final IVF failure. The doctors had informed him that his sperm count made natural conception nearly impossible. He was quite specific about the terms. "He knew I could not have children. The doctors said it was his sperm count, not me. He knew that, and he still wrote this clause?" Herbert said nothing. The other lawyers studied the table like it held the secrets of the universe. Tasmin stood, walked to the window of her office on the 53rd floor. The city spread below her like a kingdom she had conquered one building at a time. Grace Tower, the first building she had designed and developed, 40 stories of steel and glass that bore her name. Grace Medical Center, built after her mother died from cancer she could not afford to treat. Grace Plaza, a mixed-use development that had won architectural awards and made her a household name in the industry. Her name on everything, her blood in every foundation, her vision in every line and angle. And Devon had built a trap. Revenge from beyond the grave for the crime of being more successful than him, for building something that overshadowed everything he had ever done, for becoming the name people remembered while his faded into footnotes. 2 years. The clock had started the night he died. "How long do I have left?" she asked the glass. 18 months, Herbert said. "The first 6 months have already elapsed since the clause was written into the prenuptial agreement." "Get out," Tasmin said softly. They left. All of them. The door closed with a whisper. Tasmin pressed her forehead against the cold window and tried to remember how to breathe. She had tried everything to have a child with Devon. 3 rounds of IVF that had cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Hormone injections that made her violently sick, bloated, emotional. Waiting in cold exam rooms for test results that always came back negative. The doctor's apologetic face as he explained that Devon's sperm count was too low, that the quality was poor, that perhaps they should consider a donor. And through it all, Devon had blamed her, made her feel broken, made her feel like less than a woman because her body would not cooperate with what should have been simple biology. He never admitted that the problem was him, never acknowledged that his drinking, his stress, his lifestyle had destroyed his fertility, just kept pushing for more rounds, more treatments, more money thrown at a problem that could not be solved. Now she understood. He had been preparing for this, building his revenge, ensuring that even in death he would take everything from her. He had known she could not have his child, had known the IVF would fail, had written this clause anyway, setting up a trap she could never escape. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant. Dr. Kumar called. The dedication ceremony for the pediatric wing starts in 20 minutes. Tasmin had forgotten. 6 months ago, she had donated millions to build a new children's cancer treatment center at Grace Medical. The wing that bore her mother's name, Catherine Grace Memorial Pediatric Oncology Center. Today, they were unveiling the plaque, cutting the ribbon, celebrating the lives that would be saved in rooms her money had built. She was supposed to smile and make a speech and pretend she gave a damn about anything except the trap closing around her throat. She went anyway. Because that is what powerful women did. They showed up even when they were dying inside. They smiled even when they wanted to scream. They kept moving forward because stopping meant admitting defeat. The hospital lobby was full of doctors and donors and families with sick children who looked at the gleaming new wing with hope in their eyes. Tasmin moved through them like a queen through her subjects, shaking hands, accepting condolences for Devon's death that she had heard 100 times already, lying through her teeth that she was managing, that she appreciated their support, that she was fine. She was not fine. She was drowning. But drowning in private was the only luxury she allowed herself. The ceremony was short. A little girl with no hair and a pink bow presented Tasmin with flowers, her small hands shaking as she passed them over. The doctors made speeches about hope and healing and the future, about how this wing would save lives, about how Tasmin's generosity would echo through generations. Tasmin cut the ribbon with scissors that felt heavy in her hands. Everyone clapped, and then she heard the shouting. It came from the billing office down the hall. A man's voice, desperate and ragged, the kind of desperation that came from watching everything you loved slip through your fingers. Security guards were moving toward the sound. Tasmin followed without knowing why, drawn by something in that voice that resonated with the hollow place in her chest. The billing office was small and fluorescent bright, designed for efficiency rather than comfort. A man stood at the counter, his hands gripping the edge so hard his knuckles were white. He was maybe 30, tall and lean, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of weeks without real sleep. His custodian uniform was wrinkled but clean, the name tag reading B. Harrison, in faded letters. "Please," he was saying, his voice cracking on the word. "Please, I just need 2 more weeks. I get paid again in 2 weeks. I can give you something then." "Mr. Harrison, we have given you 6 extensions already," the billing clerk said, her voice tired but not unkind. She had probably had this conversation 100 times before, with 100 desperate parents. "Your daughter's next treatment phase starts tomorrow, and you are behind on payment. We cannot continue without—" "I know how behind I am," his voice broke completely. "I count it every night when I cannot sleep. I am working double shifts. I am selling everything I own. I am doing everything I can possibly do. I understand, but no, you do not understand. You cannot understand. My daughter is 6 years old. Her name is Rose. She likes butterflies, and she wants to be a scientist when she grows up, and she is dying. She is dying, and I cannot save her, and that is killing me faster than any disease ever could." "Security," the clerk said quietly, sadly. 2 guards moved in. The man, Harrison, did not resist. He just stood there, his shoulders falling, his whole body crumpling like something inside him had finally broken after holding together for far too long. "I am sorry," he said to the clerk, to the guards, to the empty air. "I am sorry. I just need more time. Just a little more time." Tasmin felt something crack in her chest, a clean, sharp break. She knew that desperation, had felt it every time the IVF failed, had heard it in her own voice when she begged doctors to try one more time, to give her one more chance, to help her understand why her body would not cooperate with what she wanted most in the world. She stepped forward. "Let him go." The security guards turned, saw her. Their faces changed immediately. Recognition, respect, instant obedience. They released him. The billing clerk stood, her face going pale. "Mrs. Grace, I apologize. We were just following protocol." "Leave us," Tasmin said. They left. All of them. The office emptied in seconds, the door closing behind them with a soft click that sounded loud in the sudden silence. She and the man named Harrison were alone. He looked at her for the first time, really looked at her, and she saw in his eyes every sleepless night, every prayer that went unanswered, every moment of watching your child suffer and being completely powerless to stop it. She saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate clawing hope that maybe, somehow, there was still a way to save what mattered most. She knew that look, had seen it in the mirror after every failed IVF test, after every negative pregnancy test, after every conversation with Devon where he blamed her for their childlessness, made her feel like her body was betraying her, like she was failing at the most basic biological function. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She sat across from him. "Tell me about your daughter," Tasmin said. And Benjamin Harrison, night custodian and single father, told a billionaire stranger about the little girl who was the only thing in the world that mattered. Chapter 2. The custodian and the Queen Benjamin Harrison had scrubbed blood off operating room floors for 18 months to keep his daughter alive, but he had never cleaned the executive wing, which is why he did not recognize the woman who just saved him from being thrown out was the one who owned everything. He told her about Rose, how she had been born 6 weeks early because his wife Lily had an undiagnosed heart condition that turned catastrophic during labor, how the doctors had worked for 3 hours to save them both, how they had succeeded with Rose but lost Lily, how he had held his newborn daughter in one arm and his dead wife's hand with the other and made a promise that he would keep their baby safe no matter what it took. He told her about raising Rose alone, the sleepless nights when she was an infant, the daycare he could barely afford, the juggling act of working construction during the day and going to community college at night, trying to build a better future for them both. How he would study with Rose asleep on his chest, her tiny fists clutching his shirt, like she knew even in sleep that he was all she had. He told her about the diagnosis 8 months ago. Rose had been complaining about being tired. Her teacher had noticed bruises that would not heal. Benjamin had taken her to the pediatrician, expecting anemia or maybe a vitamin deficiency. Instead, they sent him directly to the hospital. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia. The words had felt like bullets. The treatment had started immediately. Chemotherapy that made Rose so sick she could barely lift her head. Radiation that burned her skin and made her cry when he tried to touch her. Medications with names he could not pronounce that cost more than he made in a year, even with insurance. He had taken the custodian job at Grace Medical because hospital employees received discounted treatment. 40% off, which sounded generous until you realized 40% off of impossible was still impossible. He worked the night shift, midnight to 8 in the morning, then slept for a few hours in Rose's hospital room before she woke up. Then he was a father again, reading to her, helping with the homework her teacher brought, making her laugh even when every cell in her body hurt. Insurance had capped out after the first 3 months. He had sold his house, the one he and Lily had bought when they were newlyweds, full of dreams and plans, moved into a 1-bedroom apartment 10 blocks from the hospital so he could walk to work and save on gas money, sold his car, sold his wife's jewelry, her wedding ring, everything except the locket with her picture that Rose wore around her neck. He had called his parents, who he had not spoken to in 5 years, because they had disowned him for marrying Lily, a woman they considered beneath their family. They had hung up when he asked for help. His friends had given what they could, but they were all working class like him, struggling to pay their own bills. He was drowning in medical debt and there was no bottom in sight. "They want to start the next phase tomorrow," Benjamin said, his voice hollow. "Intensive chemo. It is her best chance. Without it, the doctors say she has maybe 3 months. With it, she might have years, might beat this completely. But I am behind on payments and they will not start treatment until I can prove I can pay for it." "How much are you short?" Tasmin asked. Benjamin looked at her, this elegant woman in a designer suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Does it matter? I do not have it either way." "I will cover it," Tasmin said. Benjamin stopped, blinked, stared at her like she had just spoken a foreign language. "What?" "I will cover your daughter's treatment, all of it, whatever she needs." He shook his head slowly. "You do not even know us. You do not know Rose. You do not know me. Why would you?" "Because I can," Tasmin said simply, "and because no child should die because her father cannot afford to save her." Benjamin's eyes filled with tears. He looked away fast, his jaw clenched tight, fighting it. "I cannot pay you back. Not in any reasonable time frame. I would be in debt to you for the rest of my life. I am not asking you to pay me back." "Then what are you asking?" Tasmin stood, walked to the window that overlooked the city. Outside, the world moved on. People lived and died and never knew each other's names. Cars moved through streets. Lights blinked in windows. Life continued with complete indifference to individual suffering. She had spent 5 years married to a man who had turned her into a weapon against herself. She had spent 32 years building an empire and had no one to leave it to. No child to inherit what she had built. No legacy beyond buildings that would outlast her, but never love her. And here was a man who would give everything, his home, his possessions, his pride, his future, for his child. The kind of father she had never had, the kind of parent she wanted to be, the kind of love that did not come with conditions or expectations, or the slow poison of resentment. "Nothing," she said, turning back to face him. "I am asking for nothing. Let me help." Benjamin stood slowly, crossed the small room to where she stood. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face like scars, the grey starting at his temples even though he was barely 30, the way his hands shook slightly from too much coffee and not enough food, and the constant grinding terror of watching your child die. "Thank you," he said, and his voice broke completely on the words. "Thank you. I do not know how to. I do not even know how to. Do not. Just take care of your daughter, that is all I ask." He nodded, unable to speak, started to leave, stopped at the door. "What is your name?" he asked. "Tasmin Grace." His face changed, recognition dawning. "You are the one who built this wing. Your name is on the building. Your mother's name is on the pediatric center." "Yes. Rose is in your building, on the 4th floor, room 412. You saved her life before you even met her. This building, this treatment center, without it, she would already be dead. And now, you—" His voice broke again. "You are saving her again." Something in Tasmin's chest twisted, a feeling she could not name. "I would like to meet her, if that is all right." "She would like that," Benjamin said, a small smile breaking through the tears. "She asks about you sometimes. Sees your picture in the lobby and wants to know if you are a queen. What do you tell her?" Benjamin's smile widened slightly. "I tell her you are something better." After he left, Tasmin stood in the empty billing office and made a decision that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and called Herbert, her lawyer. "I need you to draft a contract," she said. "Something unusual. I will explain when you get here." "Mrs. Grace, it is almost midnight." "Now, Herbert, this cannot wait." She hung up, looked at her reflection in the dark window. 18 months. She needed a biological child in 18 months, or everything she had built would go to Garrett, who would tear it apart and sell it for pieces, who would erase her name from buildings and replace it with his own, who would destroy her legacy because he believed it should have been his brother's. Devon had made it impossible through normal means, but Tasmin Grace had not built an empire by playing by normal rules. She needed a child. Benjamin Harrison needed money for his daughter. They both needed something the other could provide. The idea forming in her mind was insane, impossible, completely unethical. It violated every principle she claimed to hold. She started writing out the terms anyway, and as she wrote, she thought about the man who had just left, the desperation in his eyes, the love he had for his daughter, the kind of parent he was, devoted, selfless, present in ways her own father never had been, in ways Devon would never have been even if they had managed to have children. That was what she wanted. Not just the biology, the proof that good fathers existed, that love like that was real, that her child would come from someone who knew how to love without conditions. A sperm donor could give her the child. Any clinic could arrange that. But Benjamin Harrison could give her something more, the certainty that her baby would come from someone worthy. Someone she had seen with her own eyes, be the kind of parent she had never had. It was still insane, still unethical, still potentially the biggest mistake she would ever make. But it made a terrible, desperate kind of sense. Chapter 3. The deal that changed everything. Tasmin Grace had negotiated $100 million deals without blinking, but sitting across from Benjamin Harrison in her glass tower office, she felt like she was signing away something she could not name. He had come at 9 in the morning as requested, still in his custodian uniform because his shift had just ended. His hair was damp from a quick shower in the employee locker room. He looked confused when her assistant brought him up to the executive floor in a private elevator, more confused when he was led through a reception area with original artwork on the walls and fresh flowers that cost more than his weekly paycheck. Her office was on the top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows on 3 sides offered a view of the entire city. Her desk was a sleek piece of custom furniture that had cost more than most cars. The leather chairs were Italian. The carpet was so thick, his footsteps made no sound. Herbert sat in the corner with his leather briefcase and his lawyer face, the expression that revealed nothing and warned of everything. Tasmin sat behind her desk, backlit by the morning sun. Benjamin sat across from her, his hands folded in his lap, his work boots looking out of place on her expensive carpet. "I need to explain something," Tasmin said. "Yesterday I offered to pay for your daughter's treatment out of generosity. Today I am going to offer you something much more complicated." She told him about Devon's will, the 2-year clause, the biological heir requirement, the 3 failed IVF attempts, the doctors explaining that Devon's sperm count made conception nearly impossible, the trap her dead husband had built to destroy her from beyond the grave. She told him about Garrett, about Devon's brother, who had always resented her, who had made comments at family dinners about gold diggers and women who married for money, about the board members who were loyal to the Grace family name, about how 40% of the company in Garrett's hands could be leveraged into full control. She explained what she stood to lose. Not just wealth, she could rebuild wealth, but her life's work. The buildings she had designed, the hospital wing that bore her mother's name, everything she had built from nothing while the industry tried to push her back down. Benjamin listened without interrupting. When she finished, his face was carefully neutral. "I am sorry," he said quietly. "That is cruel, what your husband did, but I do not understand what this has to do with me." Tasmin took a breath. Herbert had advised against this, had spent 2 hours last night arguing that it was legally questionable, ethically worse, and potentially a disaster. She did not care. "I need a biological child, quickly. The most obvious solution would be a sperm donor through a clinic. Anonymous, clinical, simple." She paused. "But it is not simple. Anonymous donors can challenge anonymity laws. I have seen cases where donors tracked down children decades later, demanded relationships, sued for custody. Known donors can claim parental rights regardless of what contracts say. Family courts sometimes overturn those agreements when the child's interests are considered." Benjamin was listening now, really listening. "I have spent months researching this, talking to lawyers, looking at case law. Every option has risks I cannot accept. I cannot build my entire future on a legal document that might not hold up in court 15 years from now." She leaned forward. "I need someone I can trust, someone with clear motivation to honor an agreement, someone who needs something I can provide, leverage that ensures compliance without cruelty." "You want me to get you pregnant?" Benjamin said quietly. "Yes. Clinical insemination, professional, no intimacy required. You sign away all parental rights, take a financial settlement, and after the child is born, we part ways. The contract would be ironclad. My lawyers would make sure of that." The office went silent. Outside, the city hummed. Car horns, construction noise, the distant wail of sirens. Inside, Benjamin Harrison looked at her like she had just proposed jumping off the building together. "You want to pay me to father your child and then disappear?" "Yes." "That is—" He stopped, started again. "That is insane. That is necessity." He stood, paced to the window, looked out at the city spread below them. From this height, individual people were invisible. Just the movement of crowds, the flow of traffic, the abstract patterns of urban life. "Why me specifically?" he asked without turning around. "Because you need something I can provide, which creates mutual benefit rather than exploitation. Because I have seen you with your daughter, and I know what kind of father you are. Because you will sign the papers and honor the agreement. I believe that about you." She paused. "And because watching you love Rose showed me what good parenting looks like. I want my child to come from that, from someone who knows how to love without conditions, Benjamin turned back to her. If I say no, I still pay for Rose's treatment. Completely. Every cent. That offer stands regardless of what you decide here. You can walk out of this office right now, and Rose will get the treatment she needs. I promise you that. Why? Why would you still help if I refuse? Because Rose deserves to live. That has nothing to do with what I am asking you now. Helping her and this proposal are separate things. How much are you offering? Herbert opened his briefcase, slid a document across the desk. Benjamin picked it up with shaking hands. Read it. His face went pale. The settlement was substantial. Enough to set up Rose for life. Enough that he would never have to work the night shift again. Enough to pay for college, graduate school, whatever she wanted. Enough that if the cancer came back, and there was always a chance it would come back, he could afford any treatment in the world without selling everything he owned. "This is real?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes." "And you would really still pay for Rose, even if I say no to this?" "Yes. I meant what I said. She deserves to live. I will not use her as leverage." He looked at her for a long time. "Why?" "Because I am desperate, not evil. Because I know what it is like to want a child so badly it consumes you. Because I meant what I said yesterday. No child should die because her father cannot afford to save her." Benjamin sat back down. Read the contract again, more carefully this time. Tasmin watched him process it. The terms, the timeline, the non-disclosure agreement, the complete severance of parental rights. It was brutal in its clarity, clean, final, no room for misunderstanding or future claims. "I would have no rights to the child," he said, reading the clause out loud. "No custody, no visitation, no ability to contact them or know anything about their life unless Mrs. Grace specifically allows it." "That is correct. And in exchange you pay for Rose's treatment and I receive this settlement amount." "Yes." "When would this happen? The insemination?" "As soon as possible. We would use a fertility clinic, professional, medical. You would provide a sample. They would handle the procedure. You would never have to—" She paused delicately. "It would be completely clinical." "And if it does not work? If you do not get pregnant?" "We try again. The contract specifies up to 6 attempts over 3 months. If none of those work, the contract is void, but you still receive the settlement." Benjamin set the contract down, rubbed his face with both hands. "I need to think about this." "You have 24 hours. After that, I need to move forward with other options." He nodded, stood, stopped at the door. "If I do this, if I agree, you swear Rose gets her treatment regardless?" "I swear on my mother's grave, Rose will get every cent she needs, whether you sign this or not." Something in his face relaxed slightly. "I will give you my answer tomorrow." After he left, Herbert closed his briefcase with a sharp snap. "This is a terrible idea." "I know. If this gets out, it will destroy your reputation. The board will force you out. The media will crucify you." "Let them try." "Mrs. Grace, Tasmin, think about this. There are other ways. We could fight the will clause. We could— I am not losing my company because my dead husband decided to punish me for being successful," Tasmin said, her voice like ice. "Draw up the final papers. He will say yes." "How do you know?" "Because he loves his daughter more than his pride, and because we are both desperate enough to do something insane if it means protecting what we love most." Herbert left, shaking his head. Tasmin sat alone in her office and wondered what she had just set in motion. The call came 18 hours later, Benjamin's voice rough and tired. "I will do it, but I have one condition." "Name it." "I want to be in the child's life, not as a parent, not with rights, but I want to know my kid. Birthdays, holidays, something. I cannot just walk away completely and never know if they are okay." Tasmin had not expected this. The contract was designed for total severance, clean break, no complications, no messy emotions or future entanglements. But she thought about Rose, about the way Benjamin read to her every night, even when she was too sick to understand the words, about the kind of father he was, about how her own father had walked out when she was 8 and never looked back. Maybe knowing your biological father cared, even from a distance, was better than nothing. "All right," she said. "We can negotiate that. Limited contact, supervised, my terms. But yes, we can work something out." "Then yes, I agree. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. We will sign." She hung up, stared at her phone, wondered if she had just made the biggest mistake of her life or the smartest calculated risk she had ever taken. The next morning, they signed. Herbert witnessed with visible disapproval. The terms were clear, the ink was wet, and Tasmin Grace had just bought herself a chance at keeping everything she had built. When Benjamin's hand brushed hers passing the pen, the electric jolt was unmistakable. She pulled back fast, a slight flush rising in her cheeks that she hoped he did not notice. This had to stay clinical, professional, a transaction, nothing more. But walking him to the elevator afterward, she noticed things she should not notice. The way he moved with unconscious grace, despite his exhaustion. The rough timbre of his voice. The way his eyes were more grey than blue in the morning light. The way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching, like he was trying to figure out if she was real or just another fevered dream born from desperation. "The clinic appointment is set for next week," she said at the elevator. "My assistant will send you the details. It will be quick, clinical. You will be in and out in under an hour." "I will be there." The doors opened. He stepped in, turned to face her. "Tasmin," he said, and it was the first time he had used her first name. "I hope you get what you need from this." The doors closed before she could answer. Standing alone in her hallway, Tasmin realized she was starting to want something entirely different than what she had written in the contract. And that was very, very dangerous. Chapter 4. The Cracks in the Wall. Tasmin Grace had negotiated $100 million deals without blinking, but watching Benjamin Harrison read bedtime stories to his dying daughter made her forget how to breathe. The clinic appointment had been exactly as promised. Clinical, professional, sterile. She had arrived at 7 in the morning, been shown to a private room that looked like every other medical facility she had ever been in. White walls, generic art, the smell of antiseptic. The doctor had explained the procedure with detached efficiency. She had signed more forms, answered questions about her medical history. Benjamin had been in a different part of the building. They had not seen each other. That was by design. The actual insemination had taken less than 15 minutes. Uncomfortable but not painful. Impersonal. The doctor had wished her good luck and left. She had stayed lying down for the recommended 30 minutes, staring at the ceiling tiles and wondering if this would work, if cells would divide, if biology would cooperate where love had failed. Then she had gone to work. Board meeting at 10, conference call at noon, site visit at 3. She kept moving because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant confronting what she had just done. The 2-week wait was torture. Tasmin threw herself into work with manic intensity, closing deals, reviewing contracts, pretending her entire future did not hinge on whether a few cells would decide to divide and grow. She did not tell anyone except Herbert, did not allow herself to hope, did not buy pregnancy tests or read books about what to expect. Just worked and waited and tried not to think about the biological roulette wheel spinning somewhere in her body, but she kept going back to the hospital. Rose's treatment had started the day after the contract was signed. The intensive chemotherapy that had been out of reach was now happening. Tasmin told herself she was just monitoring her investment, checking that the money was being used appropriately, making sure the hospital was providing adequate care, standard due diligence for any charitable donation. The truth was harder to admit. She wanted to see them. Benjamin was there every day after his shift ended at 6 in the morning. He would sleep in the chair next to Rose's bed for a few hours, his long legs stretched out awkwardly, his hand still holding his daughter's even in sleep. Then he would wake when she woke, and the two of them would fill the sterile hospital room with life. He read to her from thick chapter books about wizards and dragons and children who saved the world. He helped her with math homework, even though she was too sick most days to hold a pencil, her small hands trembling with exhaustion. He made her laugh when she was throwing up from the chemo, told her ridiculous jokes and made funny faces until she smiled despite the pain. He was the kind of father Tasmin had never had, the kind she had always wanted, the kind she was trying to create for the child she might be carrying. Rose had taken to Tasmin immediately. The little girl had no hair from the chemotherapy, but her eyes were bright and curious and far too wise for 6 years old. She talked constantly about the butterflies she wanted to study, about the science fair she would enter when she got better, about her theory that stars were actually just tiny holes in the sky where heaven leaked through. She asked a million questions. Why was the sky blue? How did airplanes stay up? Where did people go when they died? Benjamin answered every single one with patience and honesty, never talking down to her, never dismissing her curiosity as childish. Watching them together made Tasmin's chest ache with something she could not name. "Are you my dad's boss?" Rose asked the third time Tasmin visited. "Something like that," Tasmin said, settling into the chair next to the bed. "You are really pretty, and you look sad. Why are you sad?" Tasmin did not have an answer. Benjamin, sitting in the corner reading work emails on his phone, watched the exchange with an expression she could not read. "I am not sad," Tasmin lied. "Yes, you are. I can tell. My mummy used to look sad sometimes too before she got really sick. Daddy said it is okay to be sad as long as you do not stay sad forever. He said sadness is just love with nowhere to go." Tasmin felt her throat close. "Your daddy is very smart." Rose smiled, the expression lighting up her thin face. "He is the best daddy in the whole world. When I get better, I am going to be a scientist and find a cure so no other kids get sick like me. And then I am going to get Daddy a wife so he is not lonely anymore." Benjamin started to interrupt, to tell Rose that was not her job, that he was fine, but Tasmin spoke first. "I think you will be an amazing scientist. Will you come to my science fair when I am older, when I am all better and my hair grows back?" "Yes, I promise," Rose beamed. "Do you have any kids?" The question hit like a fist. Tasmin felt Benjamin's eyes on her, felt the weight of the secret between them. "Not yet. You should get some. You would be a good mom. I can tell because you listen when people talk, and you do not treat me like I am stupid just because I am sick. And you have kind eyes. Mean people do not have kind eyes." After Rose fell asleep an hour later, Tasmin and Benjamin walked to the hospital cafeteria. It had become their routine over the past 2 weeks. Late-night conversations over terrible coffee while the hospital hummed around them and Rose slept upstairs. "You do not have to keep coming," Benjamin said quietly as they sat at their usual table by the window. "The treatment is covered. You have done more than enough." "I want to," Tasmin said. Then more honestly, "I need to." "Why?" She wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, felt the heat seep into her palms. Outside the window, the city glowed, lights in windows where other people lived other lives. "My husband and I tried for years to have a child, 3 rounds of IVF, all failed. He blamed me for a long time, made me feel like I was broken, like I was not a real woman because I could not give him what he wanted." She looked up, met Benjamin's eyes. "Watching you with Rose reminds me what good parenting looks like, what real love looks like. Not the kind of love that keeps score or holds grudges, the kind that just is." "Devon was a fool," Benjamin said quietly. "He was a lot of things. A fool was definitely one of them." "Did you love him? At the beginning?" "Yes, completely. He was the first person who ever believed in me, who looked at a broke girl from the projects and saw potential instead of a statistic." She smiled sadly. "I think I loved who he was when we met. But people change, or maybe they just reveal who they were all along." Benjamin leaned back in his chair, the cheap plastic creaking under his weight. Lily, Rose's mum, she struggled with addiction. Pills first, then heroin when the pills were not enough. I tried everything: rehab, therapy, support groups, interventions with her family. Nothing stuck. When she got pregnant with Rose, she got clean for 8 months. I thought maybe the baby would save her, give her a reason to stay sober. His voice went rough. She died in our bathtub when Rose was 2, overdose. I came home from work and found them both, Lily unconscious in the water, Rose crying in her crib, terrified and alone. I got Lily to the hospital, but it was too late. Her heart had stopped too long. I am so sorry. I blamed myself for years. Thought if I had been a better husband, if I had loved her more, if I had just been enough, maybe she would have wanted to stay alive. He paused. But my therapist helped me understand that you cannot save someone who does not want to be saved. All you can do is love them while they are here and forgive yourself when they are gone. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The cafeteria was nearly empty, just one janitor mopping the floors in the far corner, headphones in, moving to music only he could hear. The fluorescent lights hummed. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried. Life and death, and everything in between, happening simultaneously in this place designed to keep them separate. I took the pregnancy test this morning, Tasmin said suddenly, the words coming out before she could stop them. Benjamin went very still. And? Positive. His face transformed. Joy, fear, wonder, panic, all of it cycling through in seconds. You are sure? Yes, I took 3 tests, all positive. I have an appointment with my doctor tomorrow to confirm. That is incredible. That is... He stopped, swallowed hard. Congratulations. Thank you. The word hung between them. Congratulations. Like she had won an award or closed a business deal. Not like they had created a life together. Not like everything was about to change in ways neither of them could predict or control. Tasmin wanted to reach across the table and take his hand. Wanted to tell him she was terrified. Wanted to ask if this was real or if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Wanted to know if he felt it too. This strange connection building between them that had nothing to do with contracts and everything to do with 2 broken people recognizing each other's scars. Instead, she said, "The contract stands. This does not change anything between us." Right. Of course. The contract. But they both knew it had already changed everything. Rose woke up then, her small voice calling for her father through the monitor. Benjamin stood immediately. "I should go," Tasmin said. "I will see you tomorrow." She watched him disappear down the hallway toward the elevators, then sat alone with her terrible coffee and the knowledge that she was pregnant with his child and falling for him in ways the contract had never anticipated, in ways that could destroy everything if she was not careful. She pressed her hand to her still flat stomach and wondered what she had set in motion. Chapter 5. When the ground breaks. They saved Rose's life at 4:47 in the morning, and Benjamin Harrison kissed Tasmin Grace at 4:51 because he had just stared into the abyss and she was the only solid thing left in the world. It happened fast. Rose had been responding well to treatment for 3 weeks. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Her white blood cell count was improving, her energy was returning in small increments, she was keeping food down more often than not. She had started talking about going home, about seeing her room again, about whether her stuffed animals would remember her. Benjamin had started to believe they might actually beat this, had started to imagine a future where Rose grew up healthy, went to college, became the scientist she dreamed of being, had started to hope. Then she had a reaction, allergic shock to one of the chemotherapy drugs. Her throat closed within minutes. Her blood pressure dropped like a stone. She stopped breathing. The code blue alarm shattered the night like breaking glass. Nurses ran from all directions. Doctors appeared from nowhere, moving with controlled urgency that somehow made it worse. Benjamin was shoved into the hallway while they worked on his daughter behind a curtain he could not see through. He could hear them shouting medical terms he did not understand, could hear the machines screaming their warnings, could hear the controlled chaos of people fighting to save a life, could hear everything except Rose's voice. He had been here before, in another hospital 6 years ago, with Lily. listening to doctors try to save someone he loved while he stood helpless in a hallway and begged God for mercy. It had not worked then. The doctors had come out after 2 hours and told him Lily was gone and his world had ended. Now it was happening again. Tasmin found him on the floor outside Rose's room, his back against the wall, his whole body shaking so hard his teeth chattered. She had been home when Benjamin called at 3 in the morning, had thrown on clothes and driven to the hospital because his voice on the phone had sounded like he was drowning. She sat next to him on the cold linoleum, did not say anything, just sat there while the world ended again. "I cannot lose her," Benjamin said, his voice wrecked. "I cannot do this again. I cannot bury another person I love. I cannot. You will not. You do not know that. Nobody knows that. Then I will make it true." He looked at her, his eyes wild with panic and grief. "You cannot control this. You cannot fix this with money or power or force of will. This is not a business deal you can negotiate. Watch me." Tasmin stood, walked through the curtain into Rose's room. The doctors tried to stop her. This was a sterile environment. Unauthorized personnel could not, but she ignored them. Found the attending physician, a woman named Dr. Okafor, who had been Rose's primary oncologist since the beginning. "What do you need?" Tasmin demanded. "Specialists? Equipment? Whatever it takes, I will get it." Dr. Okafor was monitoring Rose's vitals with intense focus, adjusting medications with steady hands. "We are doing everything we can, Mrs. Grace." "Do more." "We are." Dr. Okafor looked up, her face stern but not unkind. "Mrs. Grace, I understand you are frightened. I understand you want to help. But right now, the best thing you can do is let us work. Please." Tasmin stepped back, nodded, forced herself to walk out of the room before she started screaming or crying or both. She returned to the hallway, sat back down next to Benjamin, took his hand. He gripped it so hard it hurt, and she let him because pain meant they were both still here, still fighting, still hoping against hope. The night crawled. Minutes felt like hours. Every time the curtain moved, they both stopped breathing. Nurses came and went with grim faces and quick movements. Doctors consulted in hushed voices just out of earshot. The machines continued their awful symphony, beeping, alarming, the mechanical sounds of life support doing what Rose's body could no longer do on its own. At 4:47, Dr. Okafor stepped out. Her scrubs were damp with sweat. Her face was exhausted, but her eyes were clear. "She is stable," she said. Benjamin made a sound that was not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. "She is okay. She is critical but stable. We have switched her to a different medication protocol, no more of the drug that caused the reaction. We will monitor her closely for the next 72 hours, but she is breathing on her own now and her vitals are improving." "Can I see her?" 5 minutes, she needs rest." Benjamin stood on shaking legs, went into Rose's room. Tasmin waited in the hallway, her heart still racing, her hands still trembling from the adrenaline that had been coursing through her veins for the past hour. When he came back out 4 minutes later, his face was wet with tears. He walked straight to Tasmin, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. It was desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. His hands were in her hair, hers were gripping his shirt, and for 17 seconds, the world was just the two of them, and the overwhelming relief of still being alive. Of Rose being alive. Of making it through another night, when they thought they would not. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. The hallway was empty. The nurses had retreated to give them privacy, or maybe they just understood that some moments were too raw for witnesses. "I am sorry," Benjamin said, his voice hoarse. "I should not have—" "Do not apologize. We have a contract. This was not supposed to—" "I know." They stared at each other. The air between them felt electric, charged with something dangerous and undeniable. The contract said clinical, professional, distant, but nothing about the way he had just kissed her felt professional, and nothing about the way she had kissed him back felt clinical. "I need to go," Tasmin said, her voice shakier than she would have liked. She walked away before he could respond. Before she could do something stupid like kiss him again or admit that she had been just as terrified as he was. That somewhere in the past 3 weeks, Rose had stopped being an investment and become something more. That Benjamin had stopped being a transaction and become someone she thought about when she should be thinking about work. She took the elevator down to the parking garage, got in her car, drove home on autopilot while her mind replayed the kiss over and over, the desperation in it, the way his hands had trembled in her hair, the way she had melted into him like her body had been waiting for that touch. In her penthouse bathroom, she stripped off her clothes and stood under scalding water and tried to wash away the feeling of his hands on her. Tried to forget the way he had looked at her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to earth. But when she finally stepped out of the shower and caught sight of herself in the mirror, she could still feel it. Her body was already changing, her breasts slightly fuller, her skin glowing with that first trimester radiance the books talked about. Her stomach was still flat, but she knew there was life growing there. His child, their child, the child she had agreed to raise alone while he walked away. She pressed her hand to her abdomen and wondered what the hell she had gotten herself into. The next morning, Tasmin went to the hospital early. Found Benjamin asleep in the chair next to Rose's bed, his hand still holding his daughter's, his face finally peaceful after hours of terror. She watched them for a long moment. Rose stirred, opened her eyes, saw Tasmin standing in the doorway. "Miss Tasmin," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they had removed an hour ago. "You came back." "I promised I would." "Daddy kissed you, did he not? I can tell." Tasmin froze, her face going hot. "You were asleep." "I woke up for a minute. I saw through the door." Rose smiled weakly despite how sick she still was. "It is okay. You should kiss him. He needs someone to love who loves him back. And I think you do. Love him back." Benjamin woke then, his eyes flying open, saw Tasmin. His face went careful, guarded, all the vulnerability from last night locked away behind professional distance. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "I know. Not here, not now, but soon." "Okay." She left before the conversation could go further, before she could say something she could not take back, before she could admit that the kiss had cracked something open inside her that she was not ready to examine. The pregnancy test that morning had been positive again. 8 weeks along, the baby was real, growing, thriving inside her body in ways that felt both miraculous and terrifying. And Tasmin Grace was falling for the father in ways the contract had never anticipated, in ways that could destroy everything if she was not very, very careful. Chapter 6. The Line We Crossed. Tasmin. Grace had built her fortune on knowing exactly where the boundaries were, but every time Benjamin Harrison smiled at her, she wanted to burn the whole map. Rose had recovered from the allergic reaction within a week. Dr. Okafor adjusted her medication protocol and the treatment continued with a different drug cocktail. The little girl was getting stronger, her counts improving, her energy returning in small but measurable ways. She started asking when she could go home, started talking about school and friends and all the normal things 6-year-olds talked about when they were not fighting for their lives. The cancer was responding, slowly, but it was responding. Benjamin continued working his custodian shift despite Tasmin's offers to pay him to quit. "I need something that is mine," he had said when she brought it up the 3rd time. "Something I earn that is not connected to the contract or to you or to any of this. I need to still be myself." She had understood that, respected it even. There was dignity in his refusal that reminded her of why she had chosen him in the first place. But it meant their paths crossed at strange hours. She would work late in her executive office, and he would appear with his cleaning cart around 2 in the morning, and they would talk. Small things at first. The weather. Rose's progress. Neutral topics that kept them safely away from what had happened in that hospital hallway. Except the conversations kept going longer, kept getting deeper, kept crossing lines neither of them acknowledged out loud. One night, she found him in the executive wing at 2 in the morning, cleaning windows that probably did not need cleaning. She had been at the office since 6 the previous morning, finalizing an acquisition that would expand Grace Enterprises into 3 new international markets. The contracts were signed, the deal was done, and she was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with carrying a child while pretending nothing had changed. "You are here late," Benjamin said, not looking up from the window he was polishing. "So are you." "I am paid to be here late." "So am I," Tasmin said with a slight smile. He leaned against his cleaning cart, finally looking at her. "You ever sleep?" "Occasionally." "You?" "Occasionally." They looked at each other. The executive floor was empty. The city lights glowed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the polished floor into a mirror of the sky. The only sound was the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system and the distant rumble of street traffic 53 floors below. "Do you regret it?" Tasmin asked suddenly. "The contract?" Benjamin was quiet for a long moment. He set down his cleaning cloth. "I regret that it has an expiration date." Her heart stumbled in her chest. "What does that mean?" "It means I have been thinking about you every day since that hallway. It means when I see you with Rose, I forget that this is supposed to be temporary. It means when I am cleaning these offices at 3 in the morning, I wonder if you are still working somewhere in this building." He paused. "It means I am terrible at following my own rules." Tasmin should have left, should have reminded him of the contract, the boundaries, the very clear terms they had both agreed to. Should have protected herself from the feelings building in her chest like a storm gathering strength. Instead, she walked closer. "I am pregnant with your child," she said quietly. 12 weeks now. I can feel the changes in my body. I lie awake at night and wonder what they will look like, if they will have your eyes or mine, if they will be stubborn like me or kind like you, if they will ask about their father and I will have to explain why you are not there. Tasmin, the contract says you walk away when the baby is born, that you sign the papers and disappear from our lives, except for supervised visits on birthdays and holidays. That is what we agreed to. That is what we both signed. I know. I am starting to hate that agreement. Benjamin closed the distance between them in 3 steps. They were inches apart now. Close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the day-old stubble on his jaw, the way his pulse jumped in his throat. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. "Something I should not have." "Try me." She reached up, traced his jawline with her fingertips. He closed his eyes at the touch, his breath catching. "I want to rewrite the contract. I want to know if this is real, or if we are both just desperate and lonely, and making terrible decisions. I want to know if you feel this too, or if I am imagining it." "You are not imagining it." "Then what is this?" "I do not know, but it is real. It is the most real thing I have felt since Lily died." "This is a mistake," Tasmin said, even as she stepped closer. "I do not care." He kissed her, different from the hallway kiss. That had been relief and fear and gratitude. This was want, pure and simple and overwhelming. His hands were on her waist, hers were in his hair, and they were moving backward until her back hit the window. The glass was cold against her skin, his mouth was hot on hers. The contrast made her gasp. "My office," she managed to say against his lips. "Security cameras everywhere out here." They made it to her private office, the door locking behind them with a soft click. The city spread below them like a carpet of lights, and Tasmin did not care about any of it. She only cared about the way Benjamin looked at her like she was something precious, the way his hands trembled slightly as he undid the buttons of her blouse, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. They ended up on the leather couch in her office, clothes scattered across her expensive carpet. He was careful with her, aware of the pregnancy, treating her like she might break. She pulled him closer, harder, refusing to be fragile, refusing to let him treat her like anything except what she was, a woman who wanted him just as much as he wanted her. "I have thought about this," he admitted afterward, his head on her stomach, his hand tracing patterns on her skin. "Every night when I am alone, I know I should not. I know we have a contract. I know this is supposed to be temporary, but I cannot stop. I know." She ran her fingers through his hair. "Me too." "What are we doing, Tasmin? Really doing?" "I do not know. This makes everything more complicated." "I know. When the baby comes and I have to walk away, do not think about that now. We have to think about it eventually. The contract." "Eventually," she agreed, cutting him off. "Not tonight." They fell asleep there, tangled together on the couch like teenagers who could not bear to be apart. When Tasmin woke 2 hours later with Benjamin's arms around her and the dawn breaking over the city, she felt simultaneously more at peace and more terrified than she had in years. This was not part of the plan. This was not supposed to happen. They were supposed to be clinical, professional, distant. A transaction that ended cleanly when the baby was born. Instead, she was falling in love with him, had maybe already fallen, was standing on the edge of something that could either save her or destroy her completely. And she did not know which scared her more. When Benjamin woke, they did not speak about what had happened. He gathered his clothes in silence. She straightened her hair and tried to look like a woman who had not just upended her entire life. They moved around each other like two people who had just made a decision they could not take back and were not sure if they regretted it yet. At the door, he paused. "Same time tomorrow night?" She should say no. Should end this before it became impossible to untangle. Should protect herself and her child and her company from the inevitable disaster this would become. "Yes," she said instead. He smiled. Left. Tasmin stood alone in her office and knew she was in too deep to find her way back to the surface, knew she had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, knew she was falling and could not make herself care. For the first time in 5 years, she felt alive, and that terrified her more than anything. Chapter 7. The Enemy at the Gate. Garrett. Grace had been waiting 5 years for his brother's widow to slip, and a pregnant billionaire sleeping with her custodian was the scandal he had been praying for. The first sign of trouble came from Tasmin's head of security on a Tuesday morning, a discreet phone call, a request for a private meeting, a manila folder full of photographs that made her blood run cold. Her and Benjamin at the hospital cafeteria, heads close together. Her and Benjamin in the parking garage, his hand on her lower back as he walked her to her car. Her and Benjamin entering her office building at midnight, leaving at dawn. All taken from a distance with a telephoto lens, all carefully time-stamped and dated, all building a narrative that anyone could read. "How long has this been going on?" Tasmin asked, her voice deadly calm. 2 weeks that we know of. Whoever hired the investigator is good, professional, military-grade surveillance equipment. This is not amateur hour." "Garrett," her security chief nodded. "Most likely. He has been asking questions around the hospital, talking to staff, billing department, anyone who might have information about your relationship with Mr. Harrison. He is building something." Tasmin studied the photographs. None of them were explicitly incriminating. No kissing, no touching beyond what could be explained as friendly concern. But the implications were clear to anyone looking. The pregnant widow and her hospital employee, the billionaire and the custodian. The scandal wrote itself. "What does he want?" "Leverage, I assume. Your brother-in-law has been quiet since your husband's death. Too quiet for a man with as much to gain as he has. I would guess he is building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to strike." "For what specifically?" "Challenging the will, claiming you are unfit to inherit, proving that the pregnancy is—" He paused delicately. "Questionable in origin. If he can prove impropriety, show that you manipulated or coerced Mr. Harrison, manufactured this pregnancy through illegitimate means, the courts might side with him. You could lose everything." Tasmin set the folder down carefully, her hands steady despite the rage building in her chest. "He has no proof of anything. Yet." But Mrs. Grace, if he keeps digging, if he finds the contract is sealed. Attorney-client privilege. Privilege can be broken, especially if there is evidence of a crime. There was no crime. Everything was legal, consensual, above board. Was it? Her security chief looked at her directly. Because, from these photos, it looks like something else developed. Something beyond what was in that contract. And if Garrett can prove that, if he can show the relationship became personal, became intimate, the narrative changes. It becomes coercion, exploitation of an employee in a vulnerable position. It becomes exactly the kind of scandal that loses board votes and custody hearings. Tasmin knew he was right, hated that he was right. That night, Garrett made his move. He showed up at the hospital while Benjamin was visiting Rose, appearing in the pediatric wing like a ghost from a nightmare Tasmin thought she had buried with Devon. Garrett Grace was 42, handsome in the way rich men were handsome. Expensive haircut, perfect teeth, tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. He had Devon's eyes, but none of Devon's early kindness. He was all ambition and entitlement, a man who believed the world owed him everything his older brother had built, who thought the Grace Empire should have been his by right of birth, never mind that he had never worked a day for it. "Benjamin Harrison," Garrett said, extending his hand with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "I am Garrett Grace, Devon's brother." Benjamin, sitting next to Rose's bed, did not take the hand. "I know who you are. May I speak with you privately?" "Rose is asleep. Whatever you have to say it here." Garrett glanced at the little girl, then back at Benjamin. His smile widened, showing too many teeth. "I am here to make you an offer. Not interested. You have not heard it yet. Do not need to." Garrett's smile turned predatory. "My sister-in-law is pregnant. Congratulations are in order, I suppose, though there are questions about the father, about the circumstances, about whether everything is as legitimate as it appears." Benjamin stood slowly, his jaw tight. "Get out. I am willing to pay you handsomely to simply tell the truth, the real story of how this pregnancy came to be, how a billionaire widow ended up carrying the child of a custodian she employed. The public would be fascinated by that story, the courts even more so." "I said get out." Garrett pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, set it on the table next to Rose's bed. $750,000, Mr. Harrison, more than enough to secure your daughter's future for life. All you have to do is sign an affidavit detailing your relationship with Tasmin Grace. Tell the truth about the contract, about the arrangement, about how she manipulated you into this." Benjamin crossed to where Garrett stood in 2 long strides. Up close, the fury in his eyes was unmistakable. Dangerous. "You think she is using me? You think this is some kind of scheme? I think my sister-in-law is desperate to keep an empire that should belong to the Grace family. I think she is willing to do whatever it takes to hold on to power. And I think you are a convenient means to an end. A transaction she will discard when she is done with you." Benjamin's hands clenched into fists. "You do not know anything about her." "I know she is paying you. I know you signed a contract. I know she is using you to get what she wants. And when she is done, she will discard you exactly like she discarded my brother. She drove Devon to drink, drove him to his death, and now she is using you the same way. Your brother destroyed himself. Do not put that on her." Garrett's expression hardened. "Think about my offer, Mr. Harrison. $750,000, financial security for life. All you have to do is tell the truth about what she really is, about how she manipulates people, about how she will destroy you just like she destroyed Devon." He left, the envelope still sitting on the table like a poisonous thing. Benjamin stood there shaking with rage and something else. Doubt. The poisonous seed of it taking root despite everything he knew about Tasmin. Because Garrett was right about one thing. They did have a contract. She was paying him. And when the baby was born, he was supposed to walk away. What if that was all this was? What if the office couch and the whispered conversations and the way she looked at him were just her way of keeping him compliant? What if he was being used and was too desperate to see it? That night, Tasmin came to the hospital as usual, found Benjamin in Rose's room, staring at nothing, the envelope still unopened on the table. "Garrett was here," he said without preamble. "I know. Security told me. He offered me money to betray you. What did you say?" "I told him to get out." Tasmin sat in the chair next to his, relief flooding through her. "Thank you." "Is he right?" Benjamin asked quietly, not looking at her. "Am I just a transaction to you? A convenient solution to your problem? Is that what you think?" "I do not know what to think anymore. We have a contract that says I am supposed to give you a baby and walk away. We have broken every rule we set, and I am starting to wonder if I am a fool for thinking any of this was real. If the nights in your office were just you keeping me invested, keeping me compliant." Tasmin felt something crack in her chest. "You think I am using you? Are you?" She could have lied, could have reassured him, smoothed it over, kept him compliant until the baby was born. It would have been easy, smart even. Instead, she stood and walked to her bag, pulled out the contract, the one they had both signed, the one that was supposed to govern everything between them, the one that said this was temporary and clinical and nothing more. She tore it in half, then in half again, kept tearing until it was confetti in her hands, dropped the pieces on the floor between them like a declaration of war. "There," she said, her voice shaking. "No contract, no money, no NDA. You are free." Benjamin stared at the shredded paper scattered across the hospital floor. "What are you doing?" "Proving this is real. You want to know if I'm using you? Fine. Walk away right now. Take Rose and go. I will still pay for her treatment. Every single cent, I promised you that. I will still have this baby, and you will never have to see me again. Tasmin, or stay. Not because of a contract. Not because I am paying you. Stay because you want to. Because this means something to you too. Because what we have is real and worth fighting for. But I will not keep you here with leverage and legal agreements. Not anymore." She walked out, leaving him standing there with the shredded pieces of their deal scattered around his feet like snow, leaving him to choose. And for the first time since this started, the choice was entirely his. Chapter 8. The storm that levels everything. Rose Harrison stopped breathing at 11:32 p.m. on a Tuesday, and in the 17 minutes it took to bring her back, Benjamin learned that some things matter more than pride, fear, or even truth. 3 days passed. 3 days of silence between Benjamin and Tasmin. 3 days of him wrestling with Garrett's poison and his own doubts. 3 days of her throwing herself into work and pretending her heart was not breaking. Then Dr. Okafor called with news that made everything else irrelevant. Rose's latest scan showed the leukemia was not responding to treatment anymore. The cancer was adapting, evolving, becoming resistant to the chemotherapy that had been working for months. The cells were mutating faster than the drugs could kill them. They needed to change strategies immediately or risk losing her completely. "Bone marrow transplant," Dr. Okafor said, her voice gentle but firm. "It is her best option now. We test you first, see if you are a match. If not, we search the registry." Benjamin was tested that afternoon. The results came back within hours. Not a match. Close, sharing some markers, but not close enough. The genetic lottery had not fallen in his favor. The registry search began immediately. Rose was placed on the transplant list. They sent out the call to bone marrow registries across the country, searching through millions of potential donors for someone whose genetic code matched Rose's closely enough to save her life. But the waiting was agony, and Rose was getting worse by the day. Her counts were dropping again. Her energy was fading. The little girl who had been laughing and planning her future as a scientist was back to sleeping 20 hours a day, too weak to sit up, too tired to even open her eyes. Tasmin found out through her hospital contacts and appeared in Rose's room without being asked. Benjamin had not spoken to her since she had torn up the contract, had not answered her calls or texts, had been avoiding her while he wrestled with doubt and fear and Garrett's insinuations. But when she walked through that door, when she saw Rose lying so still in that hospital bed, she did not look like a calculating businesswoman protecting her empire. She looked like someone whose heart was breaking for a little girl she had come to love. "Test me," she said to Dr. Okafor without preamble. "Mrs. Grace, you are pregnant. The testing process itself is harmless, but then test me. Blood work only. No risk to the baby. Just see if I match. Even if you match, you cannot be a donor while pregnant. The procedure, I know, but test me anyway. See if I match. Then we can figure out the rest." Benjamin watched her roll up her sleeve for the blood draw, watched her refuse to leave until the results came back, watched her pace the hallway like a caged animal while they waited for the genetic analysis. She was not a match either. The hope that had briefly flared died again. "How long does the registry search usually take?" Benjamin asked, his voice hollow. "Usually a few weeks, sometimes longer if we do not find a close match right away." Dr. Okafor's face was grave. "But Benjamin, you need to understand. Rose does not have weeks. Her body is failing. We need a match soon, or we will run out of time." That night, Tasmin made phone calls, used every connection she had, called in favors from medical foundations she had funded, research institutes that bore her name, geneticists whose careers she had bankrolled with her donations. She found a specialist who could expedite the search process, who could run compatibility tests on multiple potential donors simultaneously, who could cut through the bureaucratic delays that usually took months. She did not ask Benjamin if he wanted her help, did not wait for permission, just did it because Rose was dying and nothing else mattered. Within 3 days, they had a match. A young man in Seattle, registered donor, willing to fly out immediately. The transplant was scheduled for the following week. Rose crashed before they could make it that far. Infection. Her body, weakened by months of chemotherapy and leukemia that would not quit, could not fight anymore. Septic shock. Her fever spiked to dangerous levels. Her organs started failing one by one. The code blue alarm sounded at 11:32 p.m. Benjamin was shoved out of the room by nurses who moved with controlled urgency. Tasmin found him in the hallway minutes later, on his knees this time, completely shattered. All the walls he had built, all the strength he had maintained for months, crumbling like sand. She knelt next to him, put her arms around him, held him while he broke. "She cannot die," he said into her shoulder, his whole body shaking. "She cannot. I have given everything. I have done everything right. I sold my house. I worked 2 jobs. I signed your contract. I let you into our lives. I have done everything, and she cannot die anyway. It is not fair. It is not fair." "She will not die. I will not let her." "You cannot promise that. Nobody can promise that." "Then I will fight like hell to make it true, and so will you. We will fight together." Tasmin stood, marched into Rose's room again. The medical team was working frantically. Intubation, medications pumping through multiple IVs, machines doing the work Rose's body could no longer do. "What do you need?" Tasmin asked Dr. Okafor directly, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos. "We are doing everything." "The transplant donor. Can we move it up? Fly him here tonight?" "Mrs. Grace, even if we get him here, Rose needs to be stable first. Her body cannot handle the transplant procedure in this state. We need to get the infection under control, stabilize her organs." "How long?" "If we can stabilize her in the next 12 hours, we can do the transplant tomorrow instead of waiting until next week." "But Mrs. Grace," Dr. Okafor's voice softened, "you need to prepare yourself. Even if we stabilize her, even if we do the transplant, her chances are not good. Her body is very weak. I need you to understand that." Tasmin's voice dropped to something fierce and unbreakable. "I am not giving up on her. I refuse to give up. Do you understand me? You will do everything in your power to save that little girl because she deserves to live, because her father has sacrificed everything for her, because she wants to be a scientist and study butterflies and change the world. You will save her." Dr. Okafor met her eyes. saw something there that made her nod. "We will do everything we can." Tasmin walked back into the hallway. Benjamin was still on his knees, his face in his hands. She sat next to him on the floor, took his hand. "The donor is flying in tonight on my plane. If they can stabilize her, we do the transplant tomorrow morning instead of waiting until next week." "What if they cannot stabilize her?" "They will." "How do you know?" "Because I refuse to accept any other outcome. And because you and I are going to will her through this together." Benjamin looked at her, really looked at her, saw the determination in her eyes, the fierce refusal to yield, the way she had fought for Rose from the very beginning without being asked. "I am sorry," he said, his voice breaking, "for doubting you, for pulling away. Garrett got in my head and I let him. He is good at that. But you are not using me. This is real. This is real." "Yes." "I love you," Benjamin said, the words tumbling out like a confession. "I am in love with you, and I know we do not have a contract anymore because you tore it up, and I know that complicates everything. But I love you." Tasmin felt tears on her face. "I love you too, and I am terrified because I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to let someone in. I do not know how to be loved without waiting for it to turn into something that hurts. I will teach you, if you let me." They sat on that hospital floor for 17 minutes while doctors fought to save Rose's life. When Dr. Okafor finally emerged and said Rose was stable, both of them wept. The transplant happened the next morning. The donor arrived on Tasmin's private jet at 4 a.m., a 23-year-old grad student who had registered as a donor in college and never expected to get the call. The procedure began at 7. Rose was in surgery for 6 hours. Benjamin and Tasmin waited together, did not leave each other's side, did not speak much, just existed in that space where the only thing that mattered was the little girl fighting for her life in the operating room. When Dr. Okafor finally came out, her face was exhausted, but her eyes were cautiously, carefully hopeful. The transplant was successful. The donor's cells are in her system. Now we wait to see if her body accepts them. The next 72 hours are critical. If she rejects the transplant, we have very limited options left. The waiting was worse than the surgery. 3 days of Rose unconscious, machines breathing for her, her small body covered in wires and tubes and bandages. 3 days of holding their breath every time an alarm sounded, every time her vitals shifted, every time a nurse came in with a grim face. 3 days of Benjamin and Tasmin taking turns sleeping in uncomfortable chairs, eating terrible cafeteria food, existing in a state between hope and despair. On the 4th day, Rose opened her eyes. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they had removed hours earlier. Benjamin was at her side instantly, tears already streaming down his face. "I am here, baby. I am right here." "Miss Tasmin?" Tasmin stepped forward, took Rose's small hand in hers. "I am here too, sweetheart." Rose smiled weakly, her lips cracked and dry. "Did I die?" "No," Benjamin said, his voice breaking. "You fought. You won. I am tired of fighting. I know, baby. But you are so strong. You are the strongest person I know." Rose looked at Tasmin with eyes that were far too knowing for a 6-year-old. "Are you going to be my mommy now?" The question hung in the air. Benjamin and Tasmin looked at each other across Rose's hospital bed. "Do you want me to be?" Tasmin asked gently. Rose nodded, the movement weak but certain. "I have wanted that for a long time. You love my daddy and he loves you, and that means you're supposed to be a family. That is how it works." Outside in the hallway, hours later, after Rose had fallen back into exhausted sleep, Tasmin's phone rang. It was Herbert. "Mrs. Grace, we have a situation. Garrett has filed an emergency injunction. He is claiming you violated ethical standards by using hospital resources to benefit your personal relationships. He is demanding a full investigation into how Rose's transplant was expedited and funded. And Mrs. Grace," his voice went grim, "if this goes to court, If he can prove any impropriety, you could lose everything. The company, the inheritance, potentially even custody of your baby. Tasmin hung up, looked at Benjamin. "What is wrong?" he asked, reading her face. "Garrett is making his move. He is going after the company, after everything I have built, using Rose's treatment as evidence of corruption. What can I do?" She took his hands, held them tight. "Fight with me, not because of a contract, not because of an arrangement, as my partner, as the man I love, as Rose's future stepfather, if she will have me." "Always," Benjamin said without hesitation. "I am with you to the end, whatever it takes." And the war began. Chapter 9. The War for Everything. Tasmin Grace had toppled real estate empires and crushed corporate raiders, but fighting for Rose Harrison's life while her own empire burned felt like the only battle that ever mattered. The legal assault came from 3 directions simultaneously, coordinated with military precision. Garrett filed the injunction blocking any further use of Grace medical resources for Rose's care, painting the expedited transplant as evidence of corruption and abuse of power. He challenged Tasmin's fitness to inherit Devon's estate, citing the pregnancy and her relationship with Benjamin as evidence of mental instability and questionable judgment. And he launched a formal ethics investigation, claiming Tasmin had systematically misused company funds for personal benefit. The board of Grace Enterprises panicked. Half of them had always been loyal to the Grace family name rather than to Tasmin personally. They saw a scandal brewing, saw their reputations at risk, saw an easy out that would let them side with old money and traditional power. They called emergency meetings at all hours, demanded answers, questioned every decision she had made, suggested, some politely, some not, that perhaps she should step down temporarily until the investigation concluded, until the dust settled, until she could prove she had not been compromised by her relationship with a hospital employee. She refused every time. "I built this company," she told them in a conference room filled with hostile faces and barely concealed contempt. "Not Devon, not the Grace family, me. I took this company from regional mediocrity to international excellence. I tripled your revenue. I quadrupled your stock value. I made you all rich beyond what you dreamed possible. And I am not walking away because Devon's brother wants to destroy what I created." "The optics are terrible," one board member said, a silver-haired man who had been with the company since before Tasmin joined. "Pregnant by your employee, allegations of misused resources, secret contracts, expedited medical treatment for someone you are personally involved with. This looks like corruption, Mrs. Grace. Regardless of the truth, it looks bad." "It looks like a woman trying to have a family," Tasmin shot back, "which is apparently a crime when you are successful and female. Tell me, would we be having this conversation if I were a man? If I were a male CEO who got his assistant pregnant, would you demand my resignation? Would you question my fitness to lead?" The room went quiet. Several board members had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I thought not," Tasmin said. "You have 3 months to decide whose side you are on, mine or a man who has contributed nothing to this company except his last name and his brother's corpse." The vote came down to one deciding voice. The board split evenly, 6 votes to demand her resignation, 6 votes to keep her. The tiebreaker was Richard Chen, the CFO who had worked with Devon for 15 years and knew where all the bodies were buried. He voted to keep her, barely. But his words after the meeting were crystal clear. "You have 3 months to resolve this, Tasmin. Clean up the Garrett situation. Prove the pregnancy is legitimate. Show us this is not the disaster it appears to be, or I will change my vote and you will be out. I am sorry, but that is reality." The legal battle was brutal in ways Tasmin had not anticipated. Garrett's lawyers were expensive and ruthless, the kind who billed by the 6-minute increment and had no qualms about destroying reputations for the right price. They deposed Benjamin, asking questions designed to humiliate and trap him. Questions about his relationship with Tasmin, the timeline of their involvement, the exact nature of their contract. Questions that made him sound like a prostitute and her like a predator. They deposed hospital staff, looking for evidence of preferential treatment. Did Mrs. Grace ever request special accommodations for Rose Harrison? Did she ever interfere with medical decisions? Did she ever use her position as a major donor to influence care? They interviewed billing clerks, nurses, janitors, anyone who might have witnessed the relationship develop, anyone who might have seen something that could be twisted into evidence of corruption. They combed through every transaction, every contract, every email, looking for anything that could be used against her, any decision that could be painted as self-dealing, any choice that could be framed as abuse of power. Tasmin's lawyers fought back hard. They produced the original contract, showing the arrangement had been legal and consensual, both parties represented by counsel, both parties entering into the agreement freely. They showed that Rose's treatment had been funded through Tasmin's personal accounts, not company resources. They demonstrated that every hospital decision had been made by independent physicians following standard medical protocols, not influenced by donor pressure. They proved that the transplant had been expedited through legitimate medical channels. Private specialists Tasmin had funded through charitable donations, yes, but operating within standard medical ethics and registry protocols. But Garrett had one card left to play. He produced Devon's mistress, the pregnant woman who had shown up at the hospital the night Devon died, screaming about promises and futures that would never come. Her name was Simone Patterson, and she had given birth to Devon's son 4 months ago, a little boy she had named after his father. She took the stand and testified that Devon had promised to divorce Tasmin and marry her, that he had said Tasmin was cold and barren and cared more about money than family, that Devon's will was meant to protect the Grace family legacy from Tasmin's greed, that Tasmin had driven Devon to drink with her ambition, her coldness, her refusal to be the wife he needed. She painted a picture of a marriage destroyed by female ambition, of a good man driven to infidelity and eventually to his death by a woman who cared more about buildings than about love. It was devastating testimony, calculated to destroy Tasmin's credibility and character, to paint her as exactly the kind of woman who would manipulate an employee into fathering her child. Tasmin's lawyers tore her apart on cross-examination with surgical precision. They proved Devon had 5 other affairs that Simone knew about, women he had made the same promises to, women he had strung along with the same lies. They showed he had promised marriage to at least 3 different women while still married to Tasmin. They demonstrated a pattern of using people and discarding them, something Simone herself had experienced when Devon stopped returning her calls 2 weeks before he died. They proved Simone was being paid by Garrett, a monthly stipend in exchange for her testimony. That this whole performance was bought and rehearsed and about as authentic as a reality TV show. But the damage was done. The media had the story now. Billionaire widow pregnant by custodian while dead husband's mistress raises his real heir. The headlines wrote themselves. The gossip sites exploded. Conservative commentators railed about the degradation of family values. Liberal commentators debated whether this was exploitation or empowerment. Tasmin's face was everywhere. Her private life was dissected by strangers who did not know her and did not care about the truth. Her every decision was questioned. Her every choice was analyzed and found wanting. Through it all, Benjamin refused to leave her side. He showed up at every deposition, every hearing, every board meeting where she would allow him. When reporters ambushed her outside the courthouse, he stood between her and the cameras, his body a shield. When she broke down in her office late at night, overwhelmed and exhausted and terrified she was going to lose everything, he held her until she could breathe again. "You could walk away," she told him one night, her voice raw from hours of crying. "Take Rose and disappear. Garrett would leave you alone. You would be safe. Your daughter would not be dragged through the media." "I am not going anywhere. This could destroy you too. Your name is in every article. Your daughter's medical history is being discussed by strangers. People are calling you a gold digger, a predator, a dozen other things. This is not what you signed up for. I signed up for you. For us, for Rose having a mother and our baby having a father and building something real. The rest is just noise. Benjamin, you fought for my daughter when you did not have to. You gave us hope when we had none. You tore up a contract that protected you legally because you wanted to prove this was real. He cupped her face in his hands, made her look at him. You think I am going to abandon you now because things got hard? You think I am going to run because some people are saying mean things? I told you I love you. That means I stay. Through the lawyers and the board meetings and the horrible headlines and whatever else comes, I stay. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. If Garrett won, Tasmin lost everything. The company, the inheritance, potentially even custody of the baby she was carrying. Her lawyers were good, but not optimistic. The case was too messy, too public, too easy to paint as scandal rather than love. Then Tasmin's investigator found it, buried in Devon's estate documents, hidden in offshore accounts and shell companies with names like Heritage Holdings and Grace Family Trust, was evidence that Garrett had been embezzling from the family money for years, not just thousands, millions. Money siphoned off through fraudulent invoices, fake vendors, creative accounting that would have impressed actual organized crime. Devon had known about it. There were emails dating back 3 years, confronting Garrett, threatening to expose him unless he got treatment for his gambling addiction. Garrett had promised to stop, to pay it back, to get help from the casinos and the bookies and the offshore poker sites. He had done none of those things. Instead, he had waited for Devon to die so he could get control of the estate and hide the evidence permanently. Destroying Tasmin was just a convenient bonus, a way to cover his tracks and claim the moral high ground while stealing everything. Tasmin's lawyers filed the evidence 3 days before trial. The effect was immediate and catastrophic for Garrett. His lawyers withdrew within hours. No reputable firm wanted to be associated with provable fraud. The injunction was lifted. The ethics investigation concluded with no findings of wrongdoing. Every transaction had been legitimate, every decision defensible, every choice made in good faith. His lawyers withdrew within hours. No reputable firm wanted to be associated with provable fraud. The injunction was lifted. The ethics investigation concluded with no findings of wrongdoing. Every transaction had been legitimate, every decision defensible, every choice made in good faith. The board of Grace Enterprises held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to reaffirm Tasmin as CEO. Several members who had voted against her apologized personally, their faces red with shame. Garrett himself fled the country that night. Monaco first, then the Cayman Islands, staying one step ahead of fraud charges and embezzlement warrants and the very real possibility of federal prison. It was over. Tasmin sat in her office the day after the case collapsed, staring at the city below her. She had won, kept everything she had built, destroyed the man who tried to destroy her. But the victory felt hollow, because winning meant nothing if she did not have the people she loved to share it with. Benjamin appeared in her doorway, Rose holding his hand. The little girl was out of the hospital finally, wearing regular clothes instead of a hospital gown, her new hair growing in soft and fuzzy. Rose is asking for you, Benjamin said with a smile. She wants to know if you will come help her pick out furniture for her new room. Apparently I have terrible taste and she needs a woman's touch. New room. We are moving out of the apartment, into somewhere with actual bedrooms, somewhere Rose can have friends over without them having to sit on my bed. Tasmin stood, crossed to them, knelt down so she was eye level with Rose. I would love to help you pick out furniture, she said. Rose threw her arms around Tasmin's neck. I am glad you are going to be my mommy. Daddy was okay at being a parent, but he really needs help. Hey! Benjamin protested, laughing. Tasmin stood, took Benjamin's hand. I want to rewrite our agreement. We already tore up the contract. I know. I want to write a new one. The kind where you stay, where Rose gets to call me Mum, where the baby I am carrying has both of us, where we build something real and permanent and nothing like what I had before. Benjamin pulled her close, careful of her growing belly. I do not need an agreement for that. Then what do you need? He smiled. Just you saying yes. To what? Marry me, Tasmin Grace. Not because of the baby or the company or any legal reason. Marry me because I love you, and I want to spend my life proving you did not make a mistake when you saved us." She was crying now, happy tears for the first time in months. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. They kissed in her office doorway while Rose made gagging noises and laughed, and for the first time in years, Tasmin felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Chapter 10. The Life We Built from Ashes. 6 months later, Rose Harrison's hair had grown back in soft curls, Tasmin's belly had grown round with life, and Benjamin had finally learned that happy endings are not given, they are fought for, bled for, and earned. The wedding took place in the garden at Grace Medical Center, the same building where their story had begun. The ceremony was small, just the people who mattered. Dr. Okafor officiated, reading vows about healing and hope, and the families we choose when biology fails us. Rose was the flower girl, healthy and glowing in a yellow dress. Her hair had grown back soft and brown. She took her job seriously, scattering petals with fierce concentration, then announced that her daddy was crying, which made everyone laugh. Tasmin wore cream silk. Benjamin wore a simple suit. The vows destroyed everyone. "I came to you broken," Benjamin said, "a single father with a dying daughter and no hope left. You gave me everything." Tasmin could barely speak. "I spent 5 years invisible. You saw me when I was drowning." Rose gave a speech. "Miss Tasmin saved my life, but my daddy saved hers." The reception was held under string lights. Tasmin's first dance with Benjamin was slow and careful. He held her, his hand on her belly. "Are you happy?" "I did not know I could be this happy." 2 months later, Tasmin gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Devon Benjamin Harrison. The hospital room was full. Rose held her baby brother. Benjamin had one arm around his daughter and one hand holding his wife's. Tasmin looked at her family and realized that the empire she had built in boardrooms meant nothing compared to the one she had built in this room. Some people inherit their kingdoms. Tasmin Grace had burned hers to the ground and built a better one from the ashes.